Okay, welcome to our workshop on home composting with one of our master gardeners from 2014, Ann Osborne, who has a great composting setup at home and has been studying and teaching about composting for quite some time. With that, I'm going to let Ann take it away. Just a reminder for all of you who are attending, please use the chat box to enter a question. Go ahead and type in a question whenever you have it. We'll probably wait until the end of the workshop until Ann's finished with her comments, and then I will let her know the questions that have come in. So you don't need to save them up, but we probably won't address them until the end. So Ann, please take it away.
Thank you. It's nice to be doing this with everybody. I am a passionate composter. I've been doing I did cold composting at one house for 15 years. And then I moved to the house that I'm in now. For the last 18 years, we do hot composting. And I'm going to explain the difference, but I'm passionate about composting and the importance of it. So we're going to talk to you today about your valuable resource, which is taking material around your property and out of your house, such as greens, that sort of thing, to be able to create a resource for yourself to make the soil amendment. Could we have this next slide, please? So this is, as you can see, it's a time-release fertilizer. We're going to learn about this valuable resource. Next. And the overview of the workshop today, I'm going to be looking at my notes. The components for hot and cold composting, the air and turning, food and the different types, the carbon and the nitrogen, the temperature for the ideal range, and what's a little low during the winter. It's good to know the temperatures, how much water to put in, and how we can compensate when there's too much. And then layering of the different colors of the compost that goes into the bin. We'll be covering sifting and the tools that you might think about using besides the pitchfork, how to store it, how to know when it's ready to be stored and how to store it, and composting in the winter. And we'll be finishing up with challenges. There are 2 videos that are going to be shown in here. So we've moved to the next frame, and that is on soil conditioning. So why is it important to compost? Not only is it about soil texture and aeration, but it also improves the pH, which is right smack in the middle. We can have too acidic or too alkaline, but the pH here is neutral for the composting. The NPK, that's a term that a lot of us will use. I thought I might mention that nitrogen is good for boosting leaves for new growth. The pH is for phosphorus, and that helps flower formation and development of the roots. And then the potassium, which is the K, is for strengthening the whatever it is that you're growing. So this works in concert. It's kind of like an orchestra that is playing in our soil. And we talk about the soil being alive, and composting is actually contributing to that. So if we take a look at this graph here, the most important part is the green part, and that's 34%. And what that's pointing out is what it's made of, but also this is not going to the landfill, and that's very, very helpful. So let's move on to the next one. So I gathered information from another group of Michigan Master Gardeners for the information. We're going to talk about 4 different types of composting. Of course, there's more other types of composting, but I'm going to address 4 of them. And the focus of today is going to be specifically on the hot and cold, but I thought I'd mention 2 other types. Your children in school may be doing vermiculture, which is what you can see on the left side of your screen. And that is growing worms to eat your scraps. And that pretty much is in the house or in a cool area on the property, kept in the shade. We don't want them getting too hot, especially in our culture here. And as you can see with the drip, being able to siphon off the liquid, A, so that the worms don't drown, but B, also that you can use that liquid to feed your plants. Now the one over here on the right is bokashi. And you can see the little bag over there, that's the starter. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more in detail about bokashi, but I wanted to also say one more thing. I'm going to, at the other end of this whole workshop, say that the vermiculture is 30 times better. I'm sorry, 3 times better than just the regular composting. So the bokashi is good for people who live indoors, but they need to have access to places where they can put the compost that comes from their material. And as you can see in this bucket here, that he's pushing down, he or she is pushing down the material. The thing about bokashi is that you can put meat and bones and scraps because it's a fermentation style. But you also have to have a place to be able to take the compost and put it into soil for it to finish its process. It needs to rest for a couple of weeks after the bucket is full before you put it into the soil. The grain mix that you see in the little bag over there is very specific. Some people try to make it on their own, and it's really not recommended. It's actually contraindicated for health reasons. So it is important to try to buy it if you're going to do this style. But I wanted to say that what they use is a lactic acid bacteria, yeasts, photosynthetic bacteria, actinomycetes, and fungi. So they use about a tablespoon at a time to feed 1 cup of the scraps itself. Next. Next. He hears me. There we go. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the hot and cold and the ideal. So for sure, you want your pile away from the house because it's got all kinds of bugs that you really don't want to have come into the house. The ideal size is, you'll see this 3 by 3 by 3. So 3 deep, 3 wide, 3 tall, or 4 by 4 by 4. And some people actually make 5 by 5 by 5. But the purpose of it is to make a pile of it so that the inside stays warm and the bugs are enjoying how they're living. You'll see the air turning, the importance of incorporating air into the pile on a regular basis. And you'll see this slide over here with the turning frequency. If you turn every 3 days, you can see how quickly the decomposition happens over 35 to 40 days, as opposed to turning it every 10 days, every week and a half, or every 30 days. Cold composting, maybe every 30 days. The whole piece around cold composting is that you're not turning. You are doing in both the hot and the cold, adding the brown and the greens, and we're going to go over that in more detail. Next. These are the beginnings of the bugs that live in the pile. So the air is just like humans and animals, bugs need air. The microbes and the fungi inside the pile need oxygen in order to thrive. So when we turn the hot compost, however often you decide to do that, is we're introducing air during that time. We want to turn it from the inside out. So you'll see this in the video where you take edges, all 4 corners, and you're wanting to turn that into the center. So I will actually loosen up the pile and push the center out so that I can pull in the corners so that that part is also getting incorporated and eaten up. Turning it increases pore, P-O-R-E, space for the bugs to move through. And you're wanting to bury each new addition I actually will open up a hole inside the center of my pile. So I've loosened everything up first. I'll move back the center, dump my bucket in, and then cover it up with the brown material because I don't want rodents, you know, as I said on the video, rats and mice that you'll see. One thing to remember, there is, I think it was Cornell University that uses pipes, and I did this in the coal composting. You can take PVC pipes, whether they're that large or the smaller ones, and drill holes into them. And it's really interesting. You can just take one and push it down into the center, and that will add air because it's open at the top. So it will add air on an ongoing basis. But I've also seen ones where they actually will send tubes straight through, almost like water tubes, but they've got air holes. And so they've got them going down and they've got them going across. That way there's plenty of air going through the center. So could we go to the next slide, please? So this formula, it took me the longest time at looking at this formula. They're pretty much the same thing. It's just different language to describe it, but it's more user-friendly on the bottom one because I understand that I'm putting in leaves and that I want green and juicy, which is the scraps from the kitchen. I'm adding water and oxygen. That's helping the bugs. I did not know when I was composting. I did it more for the reason of ecological and, you know, not putting my waste into the landfill, but I never realized how important the lives of the bugs are. And that's why they're making black gold. And it really does look like black gold. Next. So we added this. This slide here is the soil food web. And as I said, the bugs are what makes the whole process happen. But we're going to have the entomologist talk in a longer video a little bit later in this workshop. Next. As you can see, they need balance. And so the carbon and nitrogen, the important piece here, you've got the formula, you want 2 carbon to 1 nitrogen, but it's also important that you play with the process. Don't let the details be a reason why you don't want to try it. When you go to be turning, especially now that it's getting colder outside, you will see steam coming off of your pile, and that's the bugs happy and doing their work. Next. Next, there we go. Carbon sources. So these are some of the resources that you can use. The reason why it says it's not all brown, as you can see, it also talks about coffee grounds. It doesn't say that there. The dead pulled weeds, cardboard. You want to be sure that there's not wax on the cardboard because that interferes with the metabolism of the bugs. Minimal ink on your newspaper that you may be shredding, and you don't want to be using glossy. Next. And here it is again. So we're looking at being able to add the browns and the greens to make the compost, the features about water, and we'll talk a little bit more in detail about the water and the air. And there's the different animals, bugs that are living in the compost pile. Next. Nitrogen, it's not all green. So these feed the bacteria. As you can read, you've got the different sources. You want to be sure on the tea bags. Some of the tea bags that we're using now are actually using a type of plastic. I've been to a couple of restaurants where I don't remember the name of the company that's making these, but they don't break down in the compost pile. So that's some of the stuff that gets sifted out later on. So we just be sure that we're not using those things. Even the egg crate, yes, thank you. This, you can tear these up. I would take this label off because it's shiny and it's ink. take it off, but it makes great food for the carbon for the bugs. The piece around cutting things into 1 inch, that's important because it does give multiple avenues for the bugs to be able to eat. We keep a pair of scissors on the back side of the sink so that we have a basket that lives on the other side of the sink, inside the sink, to catch the coffee grounds, the tea, whatever else, banana peelings, and I just cut it up as the process goes. Even the different kinds of greens, cut it up ahead of time because it's starting to break down in the bucket that lives below the sink anyway, before I take it out to the pile that's across the yard. I have found over time, it's easier to do it ahead of time to cut things up than it is later on, so that it doesn't become a mess. Next. So I'm going to give you details about why we don't want to put these things in. So the black walnut, it releases substances that might be harmful to the plants. A lot of us know that it's hard to grow anything below a black walnut. The coal and charcoal ash, it might contain substances that are harmful to the plants. Some people have feelings that it should be okay. This is a judgment call around wood ash. It is recommended through all the literature that I've read about wood ash is to keep it to a minimum, not to take the whole, if you have a wood burning stove, don't take the whole thing out and put it out, and especially make sure it's completely out. The dairy products, the basic piece around that is that it creates odor problems, and we don't want to attract flies or rodents. The diseased or insect-ridden plants, this is the difference. One of the biggest differences between cold composting and hot is the diseased or sick. Cold composting does not necessarily kill the diseases. And so if you have diseased plants, first of all, it's recommended not to put them in composting in the first place. Second, they're much more likely to have their disease die in hot composting because it gets up to 150, 160 degrees. The fats, grease, and lard, again, it creates an odor problem, and that odor, the birds and the rats and mice smell it, and they think, oh, we've got a buffet ready for us. The meat and fish and scraps, that, remember we said that in the bokashi it's okay, but in cold or hot composting, it's not okay. It creates the odor problem, attracts the flies and the rodents. And the pet wastes, this is a very important piece around not using dog, cat, or kitty litter, not to put it in your compost. It contains it could contain parasites, bacteria, germs, pathogens, and viruses that are harmful to people. And I have to do my little nurse perspective. It's very important that women who are pregnant not deal with pet waste at all. Yard trimmings which are treated with chemical pesticides, don't put them in the composting. It might kill the beneficial composting organisms. You don't want ash from briquettes, and you don't want as I pointed out, the glossy magazine covers. Next. Temperature. So I say a fair amount about temperature in the little video that we're going to watch in a few minutes, but the lower degrees are what you will experience with the winter. The bugs are still doing their jobs. They're just slowed down, kind of like all the rest of us. It's cold and uncomfortable. Ideally, 120 to 150. Sometimes it will get up to 160. You want to be turning your pile when it's getting higher up in those temperatures, not only because you don't want them to burn up themselves, but also putting air and water in will drop the temperature. And so you'll see on one of the slides that I did a 6 to 8 weeks of running a temperature control, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, just finding interventions about how to raise the temperature during the winter so that the bugs are well fed but also the material is continuing to break down. When you're first working with the composting, in the first few weeks, the ideal temperature will be about 120 to 150 degrees, and it will hold for about 2 weeks with, the addition of the turning in the water. So when it's slowing down, the whole point of checking the temperature is that we're trying to keep the bugs happy. So we want to figure out, do I need to be turning? Have I turned it this week? Do I need to add some moisture? Do they need more nitrogen? And that's that green waste. Next. So you can see on the thermometer here that we don't want it to continue to go up because it will kill the bugs. It will also kill the worms. So again, like I said earlier, it's about turning, adding water. Some people get concerned about a fire. Personally, I've never encountered anyone over 25 years who's ever had a fire, but I always warn people that it is possible that it can self-ignite if you're allowing the temperatures to go above 160. So let's take a few minutes. I think we're about ready to watch a video that's about 9 minutes long. So this is the 3 hot compost bins. Because of this time of year, I've already started activating all 3 bins because the leaves are coming down. Normally 1 would be finished, 1 would be ready to be strained, and 1 would be active. So right now what I'm going to do is show us how to take the temperature of the first compost bin. So I have hemp bags because of this time of year, it's getting cold. So one way is to take a temperature. This is a regular compost bin thermometer. You can actually use a meat thermometer, but make sure it's a dedicated meat thermometer that you're only using for the composting, not to go back into the kitchen. So we're going into the pile and we're waiting for it to come up. Right now it's probably about 82, 83, and that's about it. And what we're going to notice is I'm going to pull the gate and put the thermometer underneath, and we're going to check 2 more places in the pile to show the temperature. So it's gotten up to about 88. And what we'll notice is that that's going to be a higher temperature, and that's why we do it multiple times. So right now this is 105 degrees. So we had 88 up above and 105 below.
I stopped it.
And one more time, we'll see what shows up. Okay. So it looks like we're just about 100. Yeah, it goes down very quickly. So what the temperature will do is it'll show us if we need more nitrogen, the green juicy stuff, to feed it, or it might need turning. Okay, so I'd like to show you 2 tools that I've found very helpful in managing the composting. Part of it is because I'm a lot older than I was, obviously, and I used to use a long pitchfork, and I would break this part of it because I would use the edge of it to be able to flip it. So we're wanting to put air in for the bugs. And you're going to see big sticks inside here for the purpose of being able to create more channels for the bugs. Every time I turn it, not only am I getting more air in, I'm also pulling the outside into the center, because then it's going to heat up faster. And then by having used the pitchfork, it makes it a lot easier to use this tool, and I can get a lot further down. What I've learned over time is, even with all this turning, when I go to empty this and it's all broken down, I'll find about this much where I haven't touched it. So an important thing about turning is that every time I make a new addition for kitchen scraps coming out here, I always want to make sure I've got a hole opened up and it pulls it back over so that there's no rodents, or, you know, we don't want mice and rats and whatever getting in it. But that's it. So this is almost ready. It's not quite ready because I can see all the leaves in it. But if I really needed,
And you're sifting now.
this is sifting. And what I've done is, this is a big old rack from a grocery store. I have a screen. I have 2 levels of screens here, and I just shake it and it all builds up in the bottom of the bin, and I put it into a barrel. Now what I've learned over time with the composting is shaking it all down, I sift out pits from fruit, labels of fruit that wound up there. So I've got a bowl full of, you know, plastic and rocks and stuff that I wouldn't expect finding there. But an important piece to remember around sifting is you want to be sure that when you put it in a barrel, it has the ability to respirate, so it's aerobic, and that it sits for about a month before you use it. You don't want to put it right on the garden right away. Timing! So putting it on the garden right away competes the nitrogen bugs that are still eating the nitrogen here. The bugs will start eating your plants, your plant roots. So you want it to rest and calm down. One of the ways that you know it's ready is that the temperature that we just did has really dramatically reduced. It's under 50 degrees. So it's no longer neighborhood noise.
Okay.
So this is the shredder that I use for shredding the leaves. It works like a weed whacker. So it spins inside. So you always want to wear earplugs and have a mask so that you're not getting dusted with all of the stuff that's going. And I can actually get 5 of these barrels full of leaves that have been dumped in there, shredded, and I keep a plastic bag in the barrel, and it fills up like this. Because we have so many leaves, I use them on this property year round, but right now we've got sycamore trees and the dogwood and the birch trees. We gather all of them, we don't ship it to the city, and shred that, and I'll line up these bags alongside the garage so that I draw from them from the fall through the spring, and I will finish 18 bags by about May, June. So again, 5 barrels times 18, however many that adds up. But that's another way to be able to have all your carbon for your bins. So this is the vermicomposting that a lot of the children are doing in elementary schools. It's all self-contained.
It's done in the house. It's 30% better, 30 times better than the composting that I do in the bins. This is wonderful if you want to get started on a new garden, a new raised bed. I'm pointing over to my own raised beds. Because it's so rich, and we have a worm farm here, and you might as well pass it around as an opportunity. And then this is really good for top dressing in the 1 inch on all your beds, and putting it on your the tops of your potted plants. So you can see the difference in the colors. Look how dark this is, and see, you still see woody pieces in it. You can still see some leaves that are left, but this is what worms produce out of kitchen waste.
And how much of the other kind of composting from your bins can you produce in a year?
I can actually do 2 complete trash barrels twice a year. The important thing to remember is that it's cool, dark, and it's got a hole at the bottom of the bin so that there's air going through, and the worms or whatever may be still left in the this is considered a live product, so we want it to still be live, but we want it rested, and that the bugs are no longer going to be ready to eat fresh plants. So that's why you want it to rest for a month.
Okay, Ann, we need you to unmute yourself. Unmute. Ann needs to unmute.
Now.
Okay, we can hear you now, Ann.
Oh, perfect. I'm back. All right. So now we're going to be talking about the compost wheelie. This is just a thought process here. The greens and browns, it's a great analogy to talk about layering. The whole point, I suspect, around layering for the greens and browns, some people refer to it like a cake. The whole point of it is that you're putting a picture in your mind of, oh, I need to put brown in. All right, I need to get some carbon stuff, those cut up leaves that I did. Or I need to put in the green juicy stuff. So the important piece is putting those in and then adding water. The trick around the water is everybody says, make it moist like a sponge. Well, I never could really figure that out. I was afraid of adding too much water until I learned, oh, if I add too much water, because the bugs need the moisture and the water, I can add carbon to counterbalance it and mix it all up. So I became a little more flexible around being too worried about not putting enough water in. So let's move on. Oh no, wait, there's layering. I've talked about, so the piece that I didn't say in the video is when you start with a fresh bin, which every few months I'll have an empty bin because I've, sifted it and it's now resting and waiting. I start the bottom of the pile with 10 to 12 inch sticks at the base, because what it does is it allows airspace, and then the worms from the ground underneath, because mine is open to the dirt, there's the opportunity for the worms and the bugs to come up from the earth, and they've got space to be able to move around, and they're not getting smothered right away. That's why you saw in the video that I had a 12-inch stick that came out and I tossed it into my pile. Next to that blue bin where I did the sifting is a pile of twigs and branches that I've caught around the property over time. I break some of them up. Other ones I leave about that 10 to 12, and I've built this little base to start. So we've covered the layers. The piece around the layers is that they don't stay in layers because you're turning it once, twice a week, maybe every 10 days, maybe only once every month or every 9 months. The covers you saw on my bins are slanted, and it's the metal because you can add a tarp or cardboard, but it's so that the rain that we're fortunately having now isn't diluting the whole process and drowning all the bugs. So sometimes in the rain, I will go out and open the lid up and take the hemp bags off so that the rain can then provide the moisture. Next. There we go, sifting. So the sifting, you saw the sifting process that I did. There is a design, but I didn't put it on here. On UC Davis actually has plans on making a sifter, or you can look up on YouTube, or you can craft one like I did. I just take scraps from around the yard. You're screening out to remove the rocks and twigs and broken things that I've said before. But going back to those kitchen scissors at the sink, that is also when you want to be removing all those fruit labels, because believe it or not, I'm chasing fruit labels around the property. They don't get sifted out necessarily unless it's a very fine mesh, and mine isn't that fine. I don't like to be able to keep finding them in the yard. So the other thing is that you're sifting out the worms, and I throw the worms back into the compost bin. Next. Next. When is it done? This is like baking a cake. It's like, okay, all right. So Cornell Waste Management was very helpful on giving us information. You can imagine that it smells rich. Your compost, all the bins should smell like dirt. I mean, soil. You know, it smells good. It smells like you've been out walking in the forest, and the wet leaves, that's what it's going to smell like. The pile is reduced down from being all the way to the top. My bins get all the way filled, and I'm using the lid to push it down more, adding in the water. The pile will reduce to 1/2 to 1/3 of its size. It's rich, dark, and crumbly, and there isn't really any heat in the pile anymore. So there's no more of that steam. I check the temperature before I actually get going because I don't want to hurt the bugs. Nothing is recognizable. Well, the pile that you saw me throwing into sift to show how to sift, I had accidentally put in a bunch of leaves because I put it in the wrong one. And like with the cold composting, the 6 to 12 months, that's a judgment call. You may end up taking off the top half and putting it on a tarp, and then taking the whole bottom half out. I did this once a year. Didn't like doing that job, because then you have to put all of that used compost back up into the bin, but you've got all that black gold. So it's very helpful. Next. This is important. It's important to let it rest for 4 weeks. Some people say 2 weeks. The whole point of it is you want everything to calm down, like I said on the video, and to not have little bugs ready to eat your fresh little roots on that brand new plant that you've grown. How to store, you want it to be stored in relatively dry, cool area. Some people put it in piles. My property is a residential property in a neighborhood, so I don't have a lot of room to have piles around. I also decided that it was important for this workshop, for some of you who want to start doing this at this time, you can start a pile now. It will just take a lot longer because it'll be cooler. That's why I had those notes that showed February and the temperature was so low. You want to be able to allow it time to colonize. You're going back to that soil expansion of the healthy soil food web. Composting in the winter is slower, like I said. You can start it with straw bales and or hay. The bugs will live in 50 to 113. That's the range during the winter. I was lucky if I could get it over 95 to 100. I thought, oh, I'm doing it great. Activity is less intense, but I've also started growing comfrey, and I have a big plant of it right next to the compost bins. We didn't take a picture of that, but the comfrey leaves are that juicy green stuff so that I can cut the fronds off and throw those in. So I'm going to be documenting during the winter now, how does that work? Does it help it move, grow the higher temperatures because of the nitrogen? So now let's hear more about the bugs from the entomologists. So let's go ahead and listen to them. That's not the right one. This is the one he wants. 2 to the left. We have a station break and I'm on mute. Oh.
And I work at Chico State. I'm a professor in entomology, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how you might collect your own insects out of your compost. I have with me just some old prescription bottles that I took the label off of, and what's nice about those is I can actually see through them, and I have a nice white cap, so I can go ahead and collect something into this. I can stick it in my refrigerator or my freezer just for maybe an hour or so, and I can take it back out and I can actually pour my specimen into the white lid to get really good lighting on it to find out what it is. So I really like these. Another thing as an entomologist that I really love using is something called an aspirator or a pooter. Basically it is a cork that goes in the top of a vial. And I just put a Kleenex in here. You can also use a piece of paper towel, or if you have some, you don't want something that's too fuzzy, but you do want something that's a little bit soft, so that what you're doing is you're actually going to use your own vacuum of your lungs to take an insect in right through here, through the tube, into the vial. And then there's another tube that comes out with a little screen that blocks that insect from being taken up into your mouth, which is very important. That's the last thing you want, is to suck something up into your mouth. And then on top of that, just in case you happen to maybe suck up like a moth, they have scales on their wings, which can be detrimental to our lungs. So I added a Volkswagen bug fuel filter. So this is, entomologists are really good at these little things that people don't intend for it to be used this way, but I'm sure Volkswagen would endorse us. So, so this is our pooter, and what we can do is basically use this as a little mini vacuum and find something and basically sort of suck it up and take a look at it. So I'm looking right here at this little item on the table, and I'm gonna use my device. And here I go. And voila, I have now brought that into my vial. And obviously this wasn't an insect, but it gives you the idea of how that works.
Public education.
As we sort of look in here, some of the things we might see are things like centipedes or millipedes. Kind of those, they're not insects, but they're very long and almost appear like a worm, but with legs. And those are incredibly important as predators and to break down. Yes. Do you want us to grab that?
Actually,
On
no.
here.
Yeah, no.
You're gonna have to grab the piece, I think, and probably knock them in. Got it.
I don't know either.
Yeah, you got one in there.
Something. Yep.
Yeah, that's a Columbola, that little white one moving around in there. I don't know if it's gonna show up.
It is moving.
Oh, it's very small.
Yes.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
So it is a Columbola.
A Columbola is a non-insect hexapod. So it's a relative of insects, but they work primarily as decomposers
Okay.
as well. And Anna, did you want to comment on the stages that Columbola are found in, or did you want to add to that? I know you had a little...
Well, they are found usually in the compost because they're feeding on organic matter, and as such, they represent primary consumers. So in that ecological balance that you're trying to create within your healthy looking compost means that you're going to have different levels of insects or organisms that are contributing to decomposition of organic matter. And as primary consumers, they're consuming that organic matter that you have there. So let's say food scraps or vegetable scraps or fallen leaves, and helping decomposition process.
So generally more bugs, more better, even visible bugs?
Oh yeah.
Oh yes, those are tertiary consumers. Larger they are, that means that they're a predator, and as such they will be the one that will be consuming the smaller insects and smaller microorganisms that are or maybe bacteria, fungi that are part of the compost as well.
Yeah, so you're really creating an ecosystem in your own backyard that is full of all kinds of beneficial decomposers and the whole like food chain, you know, of those that are trying to eat each other, but also they contribute to the overall breakdown.
So Betsy and Anna, how did you know it was a Columba?
So when we looked in here, we used our flashlight, but we looked closely and we noticed that there was a lot of the same color organism moving around, first off. And they were small and they were all very light cream colored and oval. Almost not quite as elongated as we normally would think of when we think of a grain of rice, but it was very, very small, only a millimeter or so long. And they moved very quickly, and they were in very damp conditions. And typically that is the conditions we would find our non-insect hexapod relatives in there, which are those Columbola. And occasionally Columbola even have a little thing called a furcula, which allows them to basically spring and would look like they're jumping, but it's just like a wind up and then they so
Trying to get away. Eject themselves.
yeah, so they have 6 legs if you look up close, and I recommend using a small hand lens, or if you have reading magnifier, like the little reading magnifier that you use on the page that's kind of large, those work great for helping to see what you have in your and everybody has access to those.
There we go.
Why did they come?
it?
Yep.
They've never been here before.
That is a cockroach.
Yes, we know. Sorry.
Do they like compost bins?
They are great decomposers. So cockroaches are good to have, actually. And many people see them and they think, oh, good golly, no, I don't want any cockroaches. And that's why it's really important your location of your compost.
Away from the house.
Yeah,
Exactly,
yeah.
right?
A+ for location, away from the house. Cockroaches are super common in California, especially in the breakdown of organic material. And a lot of times we actually find them in a lot of agricultural operations as well, when in nuts and dates and a lot of different places that leave a little bit of fruit behind or nuts behind, because it's a great nutritional product for them.
Why do we want to know about what bugs we have? in the compost?
Right, that's that's the question, right? Well, pretty much if you have a compost pile and you want to be productive as a composter, you really need to have organisms that are going to break down that product that you place in there. And so you want to look in there and find all kinds of things happening in your compost. And some people use food scraps and other things that they will put pieces of pizza in. And, you know, we just found out that there's a whole oil production that's being utilized off of soldier fly larvae. They're using them to create oil, and they're marketing the oil, and they just feed them food scraps. So you can actually culture your own soldier flies in your compost, depending on what you're putting in. You can, if you're entirely vegetable based, you'll see your own complement of insects. And I think it's also really important that it's okay to see a lot of things that might not be insects as well, that are kind of crawling around in there.
Like lizards?
Yes,
Oh,
lizards,
yes.
They're great insectivores. And they also then will defecate into your compost, and that adds other nutrients. So
For the bugs?
yes,
Exactly. Or you might have the bugs that they're feeding on the feces. So therefore, let's say scarabs, those are the dung beetles, and they're the one that will also be part of your healthy compost, but they will have their own role in that ecological trophic level.
So entomologically speaking, is it possible for a compost bin at a home to get out of balance? Can there be too much of one thing?
Sure. I mean, what can happen is if you're a very early composter, you're just starting, you're going to have just that very first kind of, think of it in phases, really, is that each time you add, you're adding a phase. It's brand new material that you're adding to your compost. Each time you turn it, you're mixing those phases to some extent, helping each insect or the fungi or the other fun things that you have inside of that compost to sort of reach those other nutrients that might be there. And the reason that you're hopeful to see these things, and to also to have those stages where you leave it for a certain amount of time, let it heat up, you know, those all also contribute to the growth and development of the insects that are in there. Insects are entirely, almost exclusively, insects are dependent on heat units because they don't create their own heat. So they need that in order to grow and develop and to go from being a tiny little nymph to an adult. When we add sort of these bleach products into our compost, what happens is those micro amounts of bleach also impact the fungi, the bacteria, and some of those other sort of decomposing microorganisms that are so essential. And just like we have probiotics in our bodies, insects really need probiotics to break down certain types of plant material. Now, the cellulose in particular it's essential to have those little microbiome in their own guts to help them break down efficiently. So you can really kind of stall your compost if you're not very mindful about the types of paper products that you might be putting in them, or those types of things. If it has those, doesn't mean it's not overcome. You can't overcome it, but just to be mindful of it. You might need to supplement.
Add it. So like
Exactly.
the importance of the inks that you're using in your newspaper, if you're
Precisely.
shredding but not glossy magazines.
If you decide to use insecticides, those can start breaking down, and there will be residue that are part of the soil, part of the crops, or that material that will be chopped and used as a compost material. This is something that can affect biodiversity of your compost and eventually slow down decomposition and composting as well.
And that would include household types of pesticides, things we get at the box stores?
exactly, depending
Yep.
on the type of the pesticide that you're using, all of them are having toxic materials that are meant to destroy a particular group of pests. But in some cases, they're not as specific that they will go only on one species. They will cover multiple species, and that's that negative effect that can slow down the decomposition and leave those toxic materials as well within the part of organic matter that will be decomposed eventually.
A lot of folks will think, oh, I'm gonna buy organic, and that will, all of my produce, if I have organic produce, then I can just put that in my compost and know that I have no insecticide residue. That's a false understanding. There are many organically certified pesticides that exist for use in organic production, and many of them can actually be highly toxic. So it's important that we know who produces our food, and I think that this is why there's such a push for local food, and in many of our neighborhoods, supporting our local farmers and understanding and getting to know them and what they're bringing to us at the market to make good informed choices about our food products.
Do they have to worry about that ash going into the compost, would you say?
I would say they need to worry if it's more than a few inches. Otherwise, it's going to it does change the pH slightly, which then does change some of those microorganisms. But overall, if they're practicing, I think, a lot of the good amendments and other things that you've been mentioning, then it's gonna be a negligible.
So the ash on leaves from the fallen leaves, not a worry, that amount of
Shouldn't
ash.
have to worry about it, especially if it's kind of already etched into the leaf. The plant will have kind of compensated for that a little bit if it was still on the tree or on the plant or on the bush. They'll sort of that plant will have been compensating, and then once that leaf falls, there's going to be part of the composting process might have already started even before the leaf has come down with that ash on it.
Okay, Anne, are you with us? She's.
You can't do it again.
Hang on, we're getting Anne unmuted.
Here we go. Yes. And so the challenges. Am I on?
Yes,
Okay.
you are.
Oh, thank you. So on some of these challenges that are listed to show this interesting pile, on slow decomposition, check if you've got enough nitrogen and organic matter, like the plants, the trimmings, the shrubs. On poor aeration, this pile looks like it has poor aeration, turn it. If it's too dry, obviously, go ahead and re-moisten. We've talked about if it's cold weather to insulate with cardboard, straw, leaves. If it's too wet, add the carbon. If it's attracting flies, putting the food inside the center of the pile and making sure that you're not adding the meats, dairies, and oil, grease. If the pile is not heating up, is it too small? Is the pile, remember the 3 by 3 by 3 or 4 or 5? Is it too dry? If it's damp and sweet smelling, but it's not heating up, that means that you need more greens for nitrogen. If it's too hot, you guys know it, turn it. So the temperature record that I kept that was shown in the video, I wrote out little interventions just to see what the effects would be on raising the temperature in February and March. This is where that adding the comfrey would be helpful. But remember, this is the time to have fun. Don't make it complicated unnecessarily. you are keeping 34% out of the landfill. It's improving your soil and it's not feeding rodents. Next. Next. So the part where you heard me talking while the video was on, first of all, I apologize, but I wanted to be sure that you know about the hotline for Master Gardener and that their phone number is 530-538-7201. And that's why we take those bugs and put them in the freezer like Betsy was talking about, to be able to get those identified at the Master Gardener Extension Office. Next. These are the resources that are available. So I think you can read those yourselves, and please remember to wear a mask when you're working with compost. You don't want to breathe in extensively. You don't want to be breathing in the mold into your lungs. All right, I'm ready for, is helpful to add worms, but I only saw part of it.
And I can read these to you.
Super.
So we have had a few questions come in. A couple of the earlier ones are about what we can add to the compost. So Carol asks whether citrus peels are okay.
You know, what that comes down to is technically people say don't do it. What you want to consider, we add our citrus peels in, you're affecting the pH. So if you're adding a whole bunch from 6 trees, that's going to make your compost too acidic and it'll kill the bugs. So there you go, informed consent.
Okay, okay. And then Dan asks about adding manure to a compost pile.
I'm kind of giggling about this. So the manure, it can be too hot. It can have lots of seeds. If you're doing cold composting, you don't want to do that. I learned the hard way and introduced weeds that grow out in pastures all over my lawn and spent the next 10 years pulling them out and having elderly men walk by and laugh at me. So there you go. So if you're doing hot composting, you really want the manure to calm down. You don't want it hot. And I think it's chickens and rabbits manure is best.
Okay, thanks for that. And then Jay O'Neill asks about a compost tumbler and whether you need to add material. Can you add new material daily, or do you have to fill it and turn it and wait? So kind of
you can keep adding. The trick is whether or not you've got enough carbon, because you know it's nice, dark, and moist. So be sure you've got a good enough mixture of the carbon to be in there so that it's, I've seen bins where it gets soupy, and that means you've got way too much nitrogen and it hasn't been offset.
Okay. And then Heather would like to know whether adding worms to a new pile serves as a catalyst to help get things going.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
And so, you know what, I'll back, sorry to interrupt you, John. The worms are the worms that they're very specific about which kinds of worms. They're not the worms necessarily that you go fishing with. It's the worms that are, what are they, red wigglies?
Yep.
Worm farm people will help you. But yes, that is an intervention that a lot of people use.
Okay. And then Ellen asks, is it a problem if your compost is full of pill bugs?
I would want to know, you know, that's a question for the hotline. I would want to know that if it's full of pill bugs, that's an out of balance situation. So I don't really know the answer to that. That's something that would need to be researched. Why are the pill bugs taking over? Fair enough.
Fair enough. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our workshop. Thank you all for coming, and thanks to Anne, one of our master gardeners, who's obviously done a lot of composting and putting this workshop together. Take a look at our YouTube channel. We've got one more workshop on Saturday about tree selection, so you're welcome to come to that. Some of you already signed up for it. We'll be sending the link out for that very soon. Thank you all. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time.